U.S. intelligence officials revealed there is no evidence that foreign countries were involved in the so-called Havana syndrome incidents. Azerbaijan hosts the summit of non-aligned countries in search of alternatives to alleviate the impact of the Ukrainian conflict on the global south. And also, France and Burkina Faso have officially marked the end of French military operations in the West African nation. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Wednesday, U.S. intelligence officials revealed there is no evidence that foreign countries were involved in the so-called Havana syndrome incidents. According to the Washington Post, citing unnamed intelligence officials, 7 government agencies have reviewed about 1,000 cases of anomalous health incidents in the world. The findings question the long-standing suspicions on Russia or another country which may have been running a global campaign to harass or attack U.S. diplomats and embassy staff worldwide using some form of directed energy. Most of the cases investigated appear to have different causes, from environmental factors to undiagnosed illnesses, said the officials, who also stressed they have not found a single explanation for most or all of the reports. On the other hand, the officials said there is no evidence that the U.S. adversaries obtained a weapon that could cause the reported symptoms or a listening device that might inadvertently injure the people. And also, the first alleged cases of what the U.S. called Havana syndrome emerged in Cuba in 2016, with complaints of nosebleeds, headaches, and nausea from members of Washington's diplomatic staff, according to officials. There were also complaints of unexplained physical ailments by the U.S. officials in China, Russia, Europe, and even Washington, prompting further government investigation. In November 2021, the State Department appointed a new coordinator for its investigation on the case in the face of congressional pressure. In January 2022, a CIA official said the agency found it likely that Russia or another foreign actor caused most of the anomalous health incidents. Back in 2017, the Trump administration used the mysterious symptoms described as sonic attacks to minimize staffing at the U.S. diplomatic staff in Cuba. And the Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel and the Army General Raúl Castro welcomed the Secretary of the Russian Security Council Nikolai Patrushev, who pays a working visit to the Caribbean country. At the meeting, the leaders discussed the positive state of bilateral relations and their future development. The visit came after President Díaz-Canel met in Moscow with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, in November 2022. As a result of the last visit, Cuban authorities announced progress in different cooperation projects, such as the José Martí Iron and Steel Company, Antillana de Acero, oil drilling and production in Boca de Jaruco, and the rehabilitation of the metallurgical plant in Villa Clara, and the patenting of the Everprod P medicine. Colombian President Gustavo Petro inaugurated 2 new university sites at the technological campus of the Francisco José de Caldas District University in Bolivar City. The infrastructure includes, among other spaces, laboratories, rooms for audiovisual means, cafeterias, a library, learning and research resource centers, and green areas, while it also houses a virtual education center. The new facilities will benefit more than 6,300 students and will allow the enrollment of an extra 3,000 students. At the ceremony, Petro underscored that one of the objectives of his government is to achieve free higher education, making it a right for all youth. On Wednesday, a massive power outage affected millions of Argentinians in several provinces, including regions within the Buenos Aires metropolitan area. The outage was caused by a fire which affected high-voltage lines in the national grid in a day of extreme heat. Argentine and Energy Undersecretary Santiago Iannotti said the electricity demand in the country is 25,000 megawatts per day, and that but because of the outage, they were 9,000 megawatts short. The outage left close to 20 million users without electricity. The fire broke out at 4 p.m. local time in a field 60 kilometers north of Buenos Aires. The outage affected the subway network, railway services, and hundreds of traffic lights.
It's giving her a hard time. She's not used to being out, so we are doing what we can. Waiting to see what happens. Buses will be an option, but there we'll have to wait maybe longer and it will certainly be full of people. So better to wait here and see what happens.
Now we move on to other topics. In Peru, groups of protesters from different regions of the southern part of the country have mobilized towards the capital for a second takeover of Lima. This new wave of protests, led by social organizations from the southern city of Puno, has been named the second wave of the takeover of Lima. In the first takeover of the capital city, hundreds gathered at the Universidad Mayor de San Marcos, a university, to protest against President Dina Boluarte's government. Although they caused some damage in the capital, the demonstrators failed to achieve their goal, breaking through the police siege to reach the government, a palace, and the Congress of the Republic. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Azerbaijan hosts on Thursday a summit of non-aligned countries in search of alternatives to alleviate the impact of the Ukrainian conflict on the global south. The 19th summit of the non-aligned countries movement, which groups countries that are not formally aligned with or against any major power bloc, will seek solutions to the crisis caused by the armed conflict in Ukraine from an anti-hegemonic and integrative perspective. The 120 member countries will offer their point of view on the new world order that is being forged after the coronavirus pandemic, and in which countries such as India, Iran, and Indonesia want to play a more relevant role. The two parties in conflict since February 2022, Russia and Ukraine, are observer countries in an organization where the Western powers are not present. In his speech at the summit of the Non-Aligned Movement Contact Group of the Fight Against COVID-19, Salvador Valdez Mesa, Cuban vice president and head of his country's delegation to the event, highlighted the negative impact of unilateral coercive measures on member countries in their path towards post-pandemic recovery.
Our nations are drowning in unpayable debts without access to the necessary financial resources to invest in recovery. The unilateral coercive measures applied against several member countries of our movement in blatant violation of the international law and the United Nations charters aggravate this complex panorama. On behalf of the people and government of Cuba, I'm grateful for the valuable and firm support of the movement in the legitimate demand for the end of the illegal and unjust economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed on our people for more than 6 decades.
The French government's plans to raise the retirement age to 64 from 62, which has led to widespread protests, move on to the Senate on Thursday, after a tense parliamentary debate. The Senate will therefore be debating the government's proposed legislation with little modification. The chamber's less Republicans party leadership scheduled over 100 hours of discussion in order to get through the text by midnight on March the 12th. The French government is banking on support for senators belonging to the conservative Le Republicains party, who favor raising the minimum legal retirement age and having citizens work longer to obtain a full pension. However, many in France, where there is already anger over rising living costs, are against the plan. At least 42 people have been reported dead, while thousands remained hospitalized after a head-on train collision in northern Greece early on Wednesday. The accident occurred when a freight train and a passenger train collided head-on in the Vale of Tempe, near Athens, crumpling carriages into twisted steel knots in what has been considered the country's worst ever rail crash. The passenger train was traveling from Athens to Thessaloniki, carrying 350 people. Many of them were students returning from carnival celebrations. While the track is double, both trains were traveling in opposite directions on the same line. Authorities arrested the station master at the train's last stop in the city of Larissa. They did not release the defendant's name or the reason for the arrest, but the station master is responsible for rail traffic on that stretch of the tracks. The cause of the collision is still under investigation.
So far, 38 dead have been retrieved. Of the 72 patients, 15 have already been discharged and 57 remain in hospital, 6 of them in intensive care. During this rescue operation, 194 passengers were transported with 5 buses to Thessaloniki, 20 passengers with a 6th bus to Larissa, and 8 passengers were transported to Katerini.
We remind you that the 59-year-old Greek citizen has been arrested by police in Larissa, while the preliminary investigation continues. In total, 70 police officers have been deployed to the scene of the accident and at Larissa General Hospital. Relatives of those who died and were injured have been directed to the relevant hospitals.
And also on Thursday, the riot police in Athens clashed with civilians protesting outside the offices of Greece's rail operator, amid anger over the country's poor record on railway safety. Protests were also reported in the cities of Thessaloniki and Larissa, near the point where a passenger train with 356 people on board and a freight train with 2 train drivers collided head-on when they were traveling on the same track in opposite directions on Tuesday night. Infrastructure and Transport Minister Kostas Karamanlis resigned after acknowledging that his efforts to improve the railway system had not been enough to prevent the accident. We have other news. Vietnam's National Assembly elected Vo Van Thuan as the new president of the Southeast Asian nation at its 4th extraordinary session. With 98.38% of the National Assembly's membership, the body passed a resolution on the election of the new head of state. Under the resolution, Thuan, who is a member of the Politburo and permanent member of the 13th Party Central Committee's Secretariat, will serve as president of Vietnam for the rest of the 2021 to 2026 tenure, as his predecessor, Nguyen Xuan Phuc, stepped down in early February under corruption allegations. Taking the oath of office, the youngest president in the country's political history vowed to stay absolutely loyal to the fatherland, the people, and the Constitution, and work hard to complete all tasks assigned by the party, the state, and the people. Meanwhile, Vietnam Deputy Prime Minister Tran Lu Quan began an official visit to Spain, where he met with the President of the Congress or Deputies of Spain, Marcel Batet, in Madrid. During their meeting, the Vietnamese diplomat affirmed his country's determination to work together with Spain in elevating the two countries' strategic partnership to a new period of development. Welcoming the Vietnamese delegation, the host leader stated that Spain always treasures and wishes to enhance multifaceted ties with Vietnam, as well as a comprehensive partnership and cooperation between both nations. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. France and Burkina Faso have officially marked the end of French military operations in the West African nation after a flag-lowering ceremony at the French Special Forces camp. In January, the Burkinabe government gave France 1 month to withdraw its troops and extended a military accord that allowed French troops to fight insurgents on its territory, citing a wish for the country to defend itself. Their departure marked a new chapter in the West African nation's battle with Islamist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, which have taken over large swaths of land and displaced millions of people in the wider Sahel region just south of the Sahara. Nigeria's ruling party candidate Bola Tinubu wins the nation's presidential election and calling his rivals and supporters to join hands in the midst of accusations of electoral fraud. The 70-year-old former Lagos governor was declared winner of Saturday's election, securing his lifelong ambition of heading Africa's most populous nation. The Independent National Electoral Commission confirmed Tinubu as president-elect after he secured the required number of votes across 2/3 of Nigeria's states, a rule meant to ensure broad representation. The election was marked by long delays and slow arrival of online results, angering voters and the opposition parties who claimed massive vote rigging. Tinubu asked his opponents to join him to rebuild the national home candidate, and the candidates have 21 days after the results were announced to contest the election. Speaking in public after the announcement of Bola Tinubu as Nigeria's new president, the leader of the Nigeria's Labour Party and the presidential candidate in the February 2023 elections, Peter Obi, highlighted the lack of transparency in the latest elections.
No, did not meet the minimum standard expected of a free, transparent, credible, fair election. It will go down as one of the most controversial elections ever conducted in Nigeria. The good and hard-working people of Nigeria.
Violent clashes broke out on Wednesday in Tel Aviv between the police and demonstrators denouncing the anti-democratic nature of the government's judicial reform. The marchers were dispersed with water cannons, tear gas and sound grenades by the police, which blocked several streets and roads in the city. The protests have taken place for the past 2 months and have brought together tens of thousands of people, but have not prevented the controversial reform from moving forward. The reform was announced in early January by the government, formed in December by Netanyahu, with ministers from right-wing, ultra-right and ultra-Orthodox Jewish formations. According to its detractors, the text, which seeks to reduce the influence of the judiciary to the benefit of the political power, threatens the separation of powers and the democratic character of Israel. And the formal meeting of the group of 20 foreign ministers under India's presidency began at the Rashtrapati Bhavan Cultural Center in New Delhi on Thursday. In his opening remarks at the meeting, Indian External Affairs Minister Subramanian Jaishankar underscored the need to find common ground for the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, fragile supply chains, ongoing conflicts, debt crisis, and the disruption of climate events. The Indian diplomat said that there were some matters of sharp differences of opinions and views about this global crisis, but stressed member countries must find common ground and provide direction. Talking about the agenda for the G20 foreign ministers' discussions, the External Affairs Minister stated it includes the challenges of food, fertilizers, and fuel security. And also on the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov expressed certainty that Russia-China cooperation will provide progress in all areas, as the Russian diplomat met with his Chinese counterpart Qin Gang.
At a time of deep global divisions, as Foreign Minister, it is but natural that your discussions are affected by the geopolitical tensions of the day. We all have our positions and our perspectives on how this tension should be resolved. We should not allow issues that we cannot resolve together to come in the way of those we can.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.